Hello, everyone. This is Ashley Zuberry, and welcome to Primordial Sound Meditation. Today, we are going to be diving into Lesson 1 and learning specifically about meditation as an antidote to stress. So, before we get started, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. What do you experience when you feel stressed out? Are there certain times of the day or times of the year when you notice more stress? Are there particular sensations that you feel in your body when you're stressed out? Or do you notice how stress affects your daily life? Does anyone want to share? Thanks everyone for sharing your stories. And I think what we can generalize based on everything that was shared here is that essentially we feel stress when our needs are not being met and our desires are not being fulfilled. So let's talk a little bit more about stress. Stress, in and of itself, is not inherently bad. In fact, it's a survival instinct. We wouldn't be here today as human beings if it weren't for this instinct that we have. We all have it within us. Think back to when we were cavemen roaming around and a saber-toothed tiger starts to chase you. In that moment, you want to be able to respond and you want to be able to run away. You want to be able to fight so that you can survive, so that you don't get eaten. And so this is something called the fight, flight, or freeze response. And we go into this response when our brain perceives a threat to our survival. The problem is that our brain is unable to distinguish between an actual threat to our survival and a perceived threat to our survival, like, for instance, a deadline that we might come up against at work. I'm not sure about you, but I'm pretty sure that the deadline you're coming up against at work that's causing you stress is not going to actually kill you. Although, if you stay in that fight, flight, or freeze response for a long period of time, the damaging health outcomes of that could eventually kill you. So, when we go into this fight, flight, or freeze response, our nervous system is moving into something called the sympathetic nervous system. And we have a variety of physiological responses that happens in the body when we are in this system or in this fight, flight, or freeze response. Things happen like an increased heart rate, an increased blood pressure. We have an increased production of the stress hormone cortisol. Our blood sugar increases. We get a decrease in anti-aging hormones and sex hormones. Our immune system weakens. We can get a clotting of blood platelets, and we get decreased circulation to the digestive tract. And if you think about it, all of these things are happening because the body is pumping blood to our extremities, to our hands and to our feet, so that we can run, we can flee, we can fight, so that we can survive. The problem is when we find ourselves chronically over time in this state, these physiological responses can lead to really damaging health outcomes like coronary heart disease, anxiety, insomnia, addictions, diabetes, obesity, premature aging, infections, cancer, heart attacks and strokes, and digestive disturbances. And all of those health outcomes, in and of themselves, are stressful experiences. So we end up in this negative feedback loop where we experience stress for a long period of time. We have these damaging health outcomes that cause more stress, and then we just keep going in that loop. So we need tools in our lives to help us transition from this fight, flight, or freeze response into more of a relaxation response. And that is exactly what meditation can do for us. When we meditate, we transition from this really active sympathetic nervous system state to a state of deep, restful awareness. This is something called the parasympathetic nervous system. And in this relaxation response, we also experience physiological changes in our body, which include things like a decreased heart rate, increased levels of anti-aging hormones, decreased anxiety, reduced stress hormones, normalized blood pressure, deeper breathing, a strengthened immune system, decreased inflammation in the body, and an increased production of the telomerase enzyme, which is able to help us promote overall cell health and growth. So, all of those things lead us to feeling more energetic, more healthy, more balanced. We are able to access a vital energy within us and feel more creative, productive, efficient, and just overall better as a human being in our life. And when we feel better, we're able to go out into our communities and serve. We're able to go out and be a better mom, a better spouse, a better coworker, a better family member, a better friend. So, meditation, the practice of meditation, really helps us transition from this high stress state into more of this relaxation response so that we can start to access who we really are. Now, it's normal human experience for us to look outside of ourselves for happiness and contentment. We depend on other people to bring us happiness. Objects, food, our titles, roles, and the way that we perceive ourselves. But what happens when you look outside of yourself for happiness is the world is constantly changing. It's chaotic. And as things change and no longer give us happiness, we end up not getting our needs met or our desires fulfilled. That leads to stress. And then that can lead to some of those damaging health outcomes that we discussed. So we have to find a way to switch finding happiness outside of ourselves to finding happiness within ourselves. And that's something called self referral. And this is what we cultivate when we practice primordial sound meditation. We start to turn our attention inward so that even though the world is chaotic and messy and constantly changing around us, no matter what's happening outside of us, we always have the facility and the capacity to go within and find a sense of deep peace, joy, and contentment within ourselves. This is the true self. And so, yes, meditation is an antidote to stress. It helps us relax and it can provide us with really helpful and good health benefits and overall well being. But in addition to that, primordial sound meditation helps us move beyond the mind, beyond the ego, and meet your true self. Access your whole self. Remember who you really are and become a better, more integrated, unified, holistic being that understands that ultimately you are universal consciousness. So, I'm excited to continue teaching you not only how we can approach meditation as an antidote to stress, but as a way to move within, to learn how to access our deepest self, our soul, within through the practice of primordial sound meditation.